welcome to my channel. Subscribe, listen, and enjoy my stories every day. In the dim light of our bedroom, the words echoed with a sinister sneer, "You're just like your father, only weaker, Mark." Jean always had a way of weaving cruelty into her truths, a talent that gnawed at my confidence daily. But that evening, her words cut deeper, lingering in the air like the scent of impending rain. I shrugged off the sting, focusing instead on the trivialities of my evening routine. "I'm heading out for a late shift at the hospital," I announced, hoping to escape further confrontation. Jean barely looked up from her phone. "Don't wait up," she replied, her attention tethered to a glowing screen that seemed more intimate to her than I had ever been. As I drove through the rain-soaked streets, her words replayed in my mind, a mantra of inadequacy. It was on nights like these, navigating through the blurred lights and the rhythmic sweep of windshield wipers, that I felt most alone. The hospital provided a refuge of sorts, a place where I could lose myself in the needs of others and forget the coldness awaiting me at home. Yet, as the night crept on, a gnawing unease took root within me. Each emergency, each cry for help I attended to, only amplified the silence of my own desperation. Compelled by a force I couldn't understand, I found myself driving back home earlier than planned. The streets lay deserted, washed clean by the relentless rain, reflecting street lamps like mirrors into the night. I parked down the street, the shadows cloaking my car as I made my way to the front door, driven by a need to confirm my suspicions or dispel them forever. The house was silent as I entered, the familiar sounds of life eerily absent. As I ascended the stairs, the muffled sounds of laughter trickled down, chilling my spine. It was a laughter I knew well, not Jean's but one that had echoed through my childhood. With a trembling hand, I pushed open our bedroom door, and the scene before me shattered the remnants of my broken heart. There, in the tangled sheets of our bed, was my wife and my father. The betrayal was stark, undeniable, and grotesquely intimate. The shock rooted me to the spot, unable to speak, as my father turned, his expression morphing from pleasure to horror. Jean, half-covered and flushed, stared at me, her eyes wide with a guilt that came too late. "How long?" My voice was a whisper, a shadow of my former self. Jean's reply was choked, "I'm sorry, Mark." I didn't wait for her excuses. I turned and walked out, the image burned into my memory, the laughter still echoing in my ears. The following days were a blur of anger and meticulous planning. The betrayal of my wife and father, a dual treachery that demanded a response. As I plotted my revenge, I realized that destroying Jean wasn't just about retribution, it was about reclaiming the fragments of my identity she had tried to erode with her deceit. I began by isolating her socially, revealing her infidelity to our friends and family with irrefutable evidence. As her world crumbled, I ensured that the divorce proceedings stripped her of any financial comfort she once knew. My maneuvers were cold, calculated, and entirely legal. In the end, when the dust settled, Jean was left with nothing but the remnants of a life she had gambled away. And I, with nothing but the hollow victory of my revenge, vowed never to see her again. In the wake of my departure from the house that night, the silence was deafening. Each step away from the chaos of betrayal was a step towards an inevitable showdown. I found refuge in a small, nondescript hotel room, its blandness a stark contrast to the turmoil within me. My phone lay next to me, buzzing incessantly with missed calls and texts, each one ignored with a growing sense of purpose. The morning light brought clarity and a ruthless resolve. I couldn't just walk away, not without justice. My plan needed allies, and I knew just where to start. I met with Angela, Jean's sister, at a quiet cafe downtown. Her face was a mask of concern as she spotted me approaching. "Mark, I heard about last night." I can't believe Jean Ann." I cut her off, my voice steady, "Angela, I need your help. There's more to this than just a simple affair." Her eyes widened, and she leaned in, whispering, "What do you mean?" Jean's been manipulating not just me, but everyone around her. And our father, he's been. I paused, the words catching in my throat. Angela's hand reached across the table, squeezing mine. What do you need from me? Access to her emails and messages. I need evidence to not just divorce her but to ensure she can't do this to anyone else. Angela nodded, her lips a thin line of determination. You'll have it. She uses my laptop often. I'll send you everything tonight. True to her word, the evidence came pouring in by evening. Emails, texts, photographs, each piece more damning than the last. It wasn't just an affair, it was a calculated betrayal, years in the making. My father was merely the latest in a long line of manipulations. Armed with this knowledge, I approached my next ally, a former friend of Jean who had distanced herself years ago, suspecting Jean's deceitful nature. Linda, I need your testimony. People need to know who Jean really is. Linda's response was immediate, her voice bitter. I've waited for this day. Tell me where and when. The next few days were a blur of legal preparations. My lawyer, a stern-faced woman with a reputation for ruthlessness, laid out the strategy. We'll freeze her assets first, hit her where it hurts. Then, we'll go public. The affair, the lies, everything. The courtroom was cold, the air thick with anticipation as Jean walked in, her confident stride faltering as she saw the assembly of faces. Angela, Linda, even her own parents, all present, all part of my plan. Jean's eyes met mine, a flash of fear replacing the usual defiance. Mark, please, we can. No, Jean. You've played your last card. My voice echoed in the silent room. As the proceedings unfolded, Jean's facade crumbled. The evidence was overwhelming, her deceit laid bare for all to see. The judge's gavel was a sweet sound, the final decree of divorce granting me freedom and leaving her with little. But the victory was hollow. As I walked out of the courtroom, the sky gray and unforgiving, I realized that this revenge, though necessary, was just the beginning. Jean had taken something irreplaceable from me, and no amount of retribution could bring that back. The battle was won, but the war was just beginning. The courtroom victory left Jean isolated, but the deeper cuts of betrayal still bled within me. The chill of the evening air did little to calm the storm raging inside as I drove away from what I hoped would be the last encounter with Jean. However, the seeds of doubt and vengeance sprouted a relentless need to unearth every lie, to dismantle the life Jean had built on deception. A week after the trial, I found myself outside an old, familiar coffee shop where Jean and I had first met. The irony of the location wasn't lost on me. It was here, amidst the aroma of roasted coffee beans and the hum of quiet conversations, that I planned to meet someone who could perhaps shed light on the origins of Jean's duplicity. Mike, an old college friend of Jean's who had distanced himself after our wedding, greeted me with a cautious nod. He sat, folding his hands on the table, his eyes wary but resolute. Mark, when Angela told me what happened, I couldn't believe it, and yet, part of me wasn't surprised, Mike began, his voice tinged with regret. Mike, I need to know everything. When did you start suspecting Jean was not who she seemed? I asked, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. He sighed, it was after you two got engaged. I saw her with someone else. I confronted her, and she laughed it off, said it was nothing. But there was something in her eyes, a sort of cold calculation. I told myself I was mistaken, but you weren't, I finished for him, the pieces of Jean's deceitful puzzle slowly fitting together. Mike nodded, I kept my distance after that. I should have warned you, Mark. The revelation stung, yet it was the piece I needed. It's not your fault, Mike. She was good at her game. But now, it's time to end it for good. Determined to sever all ties Jean had to my life, I enlisted Mike's help to delve deeper into her past, to expose her to the few who still might be deceived by her facade. Our next step was a meeting with Jean's former employer, Mr. Daniels, under the guise of discussing a charitable foundation Jean had often boasted about working with. Mr. Daniels, a stern, no-nonsense man, welcomed us into his office, his eyes sharp and assessing. "Mr. Daniels, we appreciate you meeting with us. We're here about the foundation Jean claimed to assist. We're considering a donation but wanted to discuss her contributions first," I explained, watching his reaction closely. Mr. Daniels paused, his expression turning skeptical. Jean was involved to a degree, but she exaggerated her role. When discrepancies in the accounts surfaced, she left abruptly. We covered it up, not wanting the scandal. The confession was more than I had hoped for, and with Mr. Daniels' consent, we recorded his statement. Armed with this new evidence, our next move was clear. I called a press conference, the media eager for a follow-up on the scandalous divorce. With Mike and Mr. Daniels at my side, we laid bare the full extent of Jean's manipulations, not just personally but professionally. As cameras flashed and reporters scribbled furiously, I felt a strange sense of detachment. Jean's world, built on lies and betrayal, was crumbling publicly, her true nature exposed for all to see. Yet, as I walked away from the flashing lights, the weight of the past months settled heavily on my shoulders. Retribution had been achieved, justice seemingly served, but the path forward was shadowed with the remnants of betrayal. The drive home was long and silent. The house that once rang with laughter now stood quiet, a testament to the price of truth. As I sat in the dark, staring out at the starless sky, I knew that while Jean's chapter in my life was closed, the scars she left would take longer to heal. The battle was over, but the war wounds would linger, a constant reminder of the cost of loving someone who loved deceit more than truth. The remnants of my former life lay scattered like the fallen leaves outside my window, each one a memory best forgotten. Yet, the chill of unfinished business lingered in the air, as sharp and invasive as the autumn wind. My victory over Jean was complete, her deceit laid bare for all to see, but the deeper wound inflicted by my father remained, a betrayal that demanded a more personal form of retribution. My father had vanished after the scandal, seeking refuge from the public eye. It took weeks of searching, but finally, a lead brought me to a secluded cabin in the mountains, a place far removed from the consequences of his actions. The drive was long, the winding roads framed by the stark silhouettes of leafless trees. Each mile added to the weight of the impending confrontation, my heart a battleground of rage and sorrow. As I approached the cabin, the sight of his car, a familiar dark sedan, reignited the ember of anger within me. I parked a distance away, the element of surprise crucial to what needed to be done. The crunch of gravel underfoot seemed deafening in the silence of the forest as I made my way to the door. It swung open before I could knock, revealing my father, his face a mask of shock and fear. "Mark, what are you?" "Save it," I cut him off, my voice cold and steady. "I'm not here to talk." His eyes darted around, seeking an escape that wasn't there. "Son, please, let's just..." "No more lies," I stepped forward, closing the gap between us. My every nerve was alight with the energy of the moment, the culmination of weeks of planning. I had come not just to confront him but to end his influence over my life completely. The room was sparsely furnished, a stark contrast to the life of luxury he once enjoyed. I could see the fear in his eyes as he realized the finality of my intentions. "You destroyed everything, Dad." "You and Jean," I said, my voice low. "Now, it's your turn to lose everything." Before he could respond, I revealed the documents I had brought with me, the final nail in his coffin. Legal papers stripping him of his assets, a result of the fraudulent activities I had uncovered with the help of Angela and Mike. Every ill-gotten gain he had ever enjoyed was now gone. His face paled as he read through the documents, the reality of his new, destitute life dawning on him. "You can't do this to me." I'm your father. That title means nothing now, I replied, the words slicing through the last ties that bound us. I left him there, standing amidst the ruins of his life, a broken man. The drive back was a blur, my mind numb with the release of years of pent-up anger and pain. Weeks turned into months, and the season changed, but the scars remained. I rebuilt my life, piece by piece, the freedom from betrayal a bitter yet empowering salve. However, the past has a way of catching up, and one evening, a knock on my door brought the world crashing down once more. It was a detective, his face somber, his hat held in his hands. Mark Allen. Yes. I'm afraid I have some news. It's about your father. The words that followed were a shock I had not anticipated. My father, in his despair and isolation, had taken his own life. The news, instead of satisfaction, brought a hollow pain, a stark reminder of the devastation that betrayal and revenge could wreak. As I stood there, the detective's car pulling away, I realized the true cost of my vengeance. The chapter of Jean and my father was closed forever, but the echoes of their betrayal, and my response to it, would linger, a haunting melody of loss and the dire consequences of unchecked revenge.